also want to bring in Major Glenn Ignazio, retired Air Force Special Operations Commander, joining us on this Labor Day. We appreciate your time. You know, President Trump made this deadline for today to hold the Putin-Zelensky meeting, right? And obviously that's not going to happen. And the question is it time for sanctions? And I'd like you to walk us through how that would change Putin's calculations if it does play out that way.
Yeah, great to see you, Laura. Well, I believe we are at this deadline, and it is time to start applying pressure. As Trump has tried to stay in the middle, sort of being the mediator and not really trying to take too much of any side, I think now it really has to apply. And those sanctions are going to be with India and China. So he's meeting with them, of course, because they're going to be the biggest impact when you're shutting down any kind of oil and gas coming from Russia. So hitting India and hitting China is going to affect them. And I believe that the three of them have probably been talking about this rather extensively of how they're going to mitigate this, not only just from the geopolitics, but also we're talking about BRICS undermining a lot of the Western economic power. Plus, again, these three getting together to figure out how they would manage harder sanctions against them.
Right. And for our viewers, I'm not sure if you've seen this, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent indicated the gloves are, quote, coming off. Let's take a listen.
He has, in a despicable manner, increased the bombing campaign. So I think with President Trump, all options are on the table, and I think we'll be examining those very closely this week.
All right, so let's read into that. You know, what's the most effective steps that the Trump administration can take at this point to limit Putin's war machine? As you listen to Scott Bessent there, what do you think?
Oh, I think from a military standpoint, Russia does have the upper hand, again, with the amount of people that he's able to get, Putin's able to get from North Korea and others to be able to push. So militarily, he's putting some more weapons into Ukraine, which is great. But again, Russia has the upper hand. So the only way to hit Russia heavy is by hitting them economically. Their inflation is high. And again, their biggest exports are going to India and China, especially on their fuel. So by hitting them, that really damages Russia significantly more and makes it more difficult both for Putin and the country. So I think that's really the only influence that he can particularly put against Putin right now, because there's no real carrots out there that Putin's jumping on. You know, it's almost like you have to incentivize him either by pain or by, you know, some other pressure to pull him back out of Ukraine. And right now, I don't see how that's going to happen in a nice way. So I think it's going to have to be heavy-handed.
Yeah, you know, Putin is clearly dragging his feet on peace talks, right? You know, Ukraine is now openly discussing offensive strikes inside of Russia. So when you take a look at that, what's your reaction to that idea?
I think, unfortunately, it is escalating as a whole, where we see Russia attacking again. You know, it's nice to see Robert safe with his team because Kyiv has been decimated lately. So they are increasing that. And I feel like they're trying to break the back of Ukraine spiritually. More, you know, morale is just being decimated here. So Ukraine really has no other options than to push further into Russia. Unfortunately, that's escalating. We also see that Putin is really playing it a lot better. Before it was to denazify Ukraine and basically to invade Ukraine. But over time, it's been very insidious. But now it's I am protecting Russia against the United States, against the West, against NATO. So he's transitioned that very well over the last couple of years. So that's how he's representing it, is it's the West and NATO against Russia. And that's how he has positioned this. So I think it will escalate further into Russia if Ukraine takes these attacks, which I think they really have to.
Right. And we've also taken a look at key sticking points, right, in the negotiations, the security guarantees for Ukraine. That has been a huge deal. And there's been a lot of discussion about using close air support to defend Ukraine. But is that enough?
No, it wouldn't be enough. And so, first of all, you're seeing a lot of European Union saying they would use troops, but their people, their citizens aren't really supporting that. So if the United States was also to say, hey, we're going to give you air support, there's a lot of things that people have to think about this, is that there has to be the logistics and the assets to do that, the command and control to be able to command those aircraft. And at the same time, if somebody was unfortunately shot down, you have to have those rescue forces and so forth in there to be able to get them out. What happens if they go down in Russia? What happens if they go to Ukraine? So complicated for that to happen, but I understand about putting that power in there. Very, very difficult to actually execute it. So the talk of private contractors is starting to come up as you see Wagner in other parts of the world because of Russia. You can see other contractors getting in there. They're not military. They could be paid by a variety of different countries to be sort of security forces. And that's what we heard today, which is very interesting and could change the dynamic greatly.
Right, and I wanted to ask you about the Telegraph is out with a new report suggesting that American private military firms could be deployed to keep the peace in Ukraine. I mean, you're really talking about thinking outside the box. You're going wide, you're zooming out. The fear is that this could lead to escalation from Putin, though. So does that reward outweigh the risk, you think?
Well, it's interesting because he had Wagner Group actually fighting in Ukraine, which is sort of a professional military corporation.
Hmm.
So Putin actually took that action before. So having these particular contractors in there now, usually anything that's been contracted, especially in the United States and others, is that these are defensive oriented, protective type organizations, and they could protect the country.
Hmm.
So the rules of engagements would be very dangerous as far as being offensive, but they might be able to be defensive in that nature. I mean, again, Putin did this with Wagner. Now he'll probably protest it, but it is an option that is definitely out of the box that could help Ukraine because their people is their biggest weakness right now. They're just losing soldiers and they don't have enough to back them up.
Yeah, you mentioned Robert Sherman's reporting, which of course has been so excellent, and that's why we're so glad that he's there to give us eyes on the ground, and we'll check back in with him on that. French President Emmanuel Macron has some choice words about Putin's relationship with Trump. We were very interested in this. We're going to pay attention to the subtitles here. Let's listen.
Si ça n'est pas tenu lundi, échéance qui avait été fixée par le président Trump, je crois qu'une fois encore, ça voudra dire que le président Poutine se sera joué du président Trump.
Okay, so how much is the disconnect between the Trump administration and Europe hurting the West's overall efforts to pressure Putin into ending the war when you take a listen and a watch of those subtitles?
Oh, it's great to see them all in Washington discussing this, and it
Yeah.
is the best effort to get forward, right? But when you see this, it's like Putin's playing Trump. Well, it's Putin playing everybody because everybody's involved in this. It's not just Trump; it's the EU and NATO as whole. So it's really one of those things of pushing that they need to have complete pressure against Russia. At the same time, the EU has been concerned about Trump sort of placating Putin. So I think this is one way for them to sort of squeeze in there and say, "Hey, we don't want to give any concessions to Putin whatsoever." At this point, I don't think there should be any. We're probably a couple of weeks after, and thousands have died. So I believe that this being dragged out is definitely something that Trump should not let go any further.
And Glenn, we're just getting this into the newsroom that France has ordered its hospitals to be prepared for war in less than a year. Is that what is coming next in order for the West to defeat Russia? I mean, that is very serious. At least it sounds like it is.
Yeah, it is very serious to hear that because is this one of those things where they are going to put their troops on the ground? And as soon as you put those troops on the ground, now the idea is that they are a NATO organization, but the idea that NATO as a whole is not going in there. So we would have to separate and make sure there's a distinct difference between that. But if France was to put their troops in there, you're now escalating the conflict where now it is Western nations getting involved with Russia. And those are going to increase. But at the same time, Ukraine's biggest I would say weakness at this point is, again, they don't have reserves. The people that have been fighting the war have been fighting since the beginning. They haven't had reserves. They haven't had relief. That's the weakness for Ukraine, regardless of weapons. So this would definitely benefit them, but I don't see Ukraine pushing Russia out unless somebody helps them. But I believe that that would be very, very dangerous at this time. And again, a Western nation, a NATO member attacking Russia really beefs up Putin's story. And I'd be afraid if China and or India starts backing them, just like right now you're seeing France get involved with Ukraine.
Yeah, and getting their hospitals prepared for war within the next year. So we're going to continue to watch that as well. Glenn Ignacio, thank you so much for being here on this Labor Day. We really appreciate it.